So, hello everyone. We are Team Adoptium, and our team member are Shelley Xiu, Amanda Nguyen, and Paul Saunders. And our mentors is Sophia Guo and Shelley Lambert and Lan Xia. So first of all, Eclipse Adoptium, also known as OpenJDK. Java is a world's leading programming language. Adoptium's goal is to provide high-quality Java binary to the Java ecosystem. It is the second largest distributor of OpenJDK binaries, with nearly 324 million plus downloads. It is differentiated by diverse and open community, and also a range of platforms, and also quality assurance programs. Now I'm talking about the project structure of the Eclipse Adoptium. It consists of 4 parts, and first one is a Tamirin, and the second one is AQAvit, and the third one is incubator, and the fourth one is a Tamirin compliance. We are mainly focused on AQAvit. Let me give you guys an overview of AQAvit. It is a set of tests selected from key open source stacks. It ensures enterprise level quality requirements. It is also community-driven process. It is designed for developer DevOps, which including reproducible test environment and graduated levels of testing. And as you can see from the pictures, there are 87 million tests run per release, and that's even without including the different builds like PR builds, promotion builds, or personal builds. And therefore, the test efficiency is very crucial. And the whole automation process can be divided into 3 layers. We can also describe it as 3-layer cakes. And the first layer is test case gen. The second layer is continuous integration systems, including Jenkins, GitHub Actions, and many more. And the third layer is test result summary services.
So the fall 2021 code sprint was primarily spent on 2 different sections of the code base, or of AQAvit. The first of them being Jenkins. Now, Jenkins is a service that exists outside of Adoptium. It's primarily an automation server which provides different services based around automation of software. So building, testing, deployment, continuous integration, that sort of thing. And it's the system with which we run the vast majority of tests on Adoptium. Inside of Jenkins, there exists a particular job called Grinder, which is used primarily as an analysis tool. And so if a test fails for some reason, Grinder will allow us to rerun that test with a custom set of settings to get a better understanding of why that test is failing and like what settings we can do to change it to make it succeed. And so on the left, we have Jenkins, that's the homepage there. And on the right, we have Grinder, where each of those green rows represents a particular test. And so you can see we have queue, setup, build, test, and post. And each of those steps can be analyzed individually. And so we can get a far better understanding of why a test is failing than if it was just a green, yellow, or red check mark that said fail. Now, the goal for the Jenkins part of this code sprint was to create a disabled test pipeline. Now, a really cool thing that Adoptium has in their GitHub repository is that they can actually disable a test just by creating a comment on an issue. So if an issue, for instance, says like, hey, we have a failure on this particular test on this particular operating system, then you can see on the bottom, if you do this auto exclude and then list a test, it'll actually go into the GitHub repository and change the XML files, which disables a test or disables that particular test. And it'll link back to this issue and say like, this is the issue where it was disabled, which is cool that you can just disable a test like that. But what happens if you fix the issue or if you close that GitHub issue? There's no way to remove that. There's no way to remove that disabling. And so what we wanted to do was constantly query the Git API. And if a test disabled, or if a test that was disabled, if the issue for that disable is closed, then it's possible that the test that was disabled no longer needs to be disabled, right? It'll succeed. And so what we want to do is every time a Git issue is disabled, we want to check if that issue had any test disables happen. If those tests were disabled, then we want to rerun those tests and see if they are actually passing. If they are passing, then we know that those tests can be re-enabled. Now, this involves multiple separate issues because, of course, those tests are written to an XML file. Then that XML file is parsed into JSON. Then that JSON needs to be read, that issue queried, and then if that status is closed, then it needs to be rerun. We only got to the final two of them because we only had a weekend, but it's our intention to get to all of them within the next few weeks. And so the first thing that we particularly discussed was the query get issue URL to get issue status. You can see on the left image here, this is the JSON that's created when you write that command in a GitHub thread. It just lists all of the settings that were all of the settings for that test, as well as it links back to that GitHub issue. And so what we do is we keep querying, and if that get issue status is closed, like you can see highlighted on the right, then we know that we need to read that JSON file and trigger the Jenkins grinder, which is the other task that we worked on. Now, currently, the downside is that we need tokens to interact with Jenkins API. Of course, we can't just have anybody going in and running any tests. That doesn't make any sense. And the settings for that aren't quite set up yet. And so what we have now is this service will just print out the URL to rerun that test. Copying that URL, pasting it into the URL bar will bring you to this page, and all a user needs to do is click the proceed button on the bottom to run that test. So it's just another extra step that a user needs to do. And our hope is to eventually get it where there's no user interaction at all. All of it is automatic, where if you close an issue, it'll query this service and rerun any tests that were disabled in that thread. Now, going away from Jenkins for a second, we have the test results summary service, which helps to summarize different Jenkins jobs. And this is almost exclusively an analysis tool, because rather than actually running tests from this, we can use it to compare results across different platforms, push results to a database, monitor Jenkins servers. It's an analysis tool first and foremost. Now, this TRSS moved to an Adoptium color code a little while back, but there were some small tasks that we had to take care of. Like, for instance, you can see on the left, it doesn't look good. That bar, or the HTML box, is much too low. There's no clear distinction between the logo and the title of the actual service. And so what we did is we just, as shown on the right, we just made it look a little bit better. So there wasn't much to do here. It's just a task that we had to take care of purely for quality of experience. And then another thing that we did with TRSS is we changed it to list all of the possible issues, including closed. And so as an analysis tool, you might want to compare different tests that are similar to see if the effect of one has an effect on the other, or if like one test can have an influence on another, if it might provide some advice to another. But previously, it was only showing open issues. And so, for instance, if you had a test 6 months ago that you finally figured out, and so you closed that issue, but then you had a very, very similar issue crop up now, and so you disabled a test, you wouldn't be able to find that in this service. You'd only be able to look at the open issues. And so we just made it that over the last 6 months, all closed issues in that time frame will also pop up here. And so you can look into those issues and see if there's one similar to a test that's failing that you're looking at, so that you can gain any more insight that you otherwise would not be able to gain.
Perfect. So for the fall semester, we really have just two big goals. So the first one is streamlining our processes with improved automation. The second is our Adoptium Marketplace. Right there, I actually have a picture of IBM's download page for some of their binaries. It'll come into play for a second, but if you can go on the next slide. So our first goal is really going to be an ongoing effort to try and reduce our technical efforts. So similar to what Paul was talking about, like closing issues through comments in GitHub, we'll really be looking at what processes we keep having to repeat that needs a lot of like manual steps and take a lot of time. And we'll try and improve it by automating it all. We'll try to do this by building tools and workflows to support an easier or faster release process. Perfect. So our big kahuna this semester is the Adoptium Marketplace. This project is trying to get all our member companies to list their binaries all in one centralized location. So that example of IBM's download page, they'll be able to list those binaries on our marketplace. So some criteria on who gets to list their binaries is that they have to be contributing to our project, either by money or engineers, and therefore are a part of our working group. Their binaries have to pass a TCK suite, which are just compliance tests. But where we come in is the AQA suite, which I'll explain in a little bit. This project is actually still in its early stages, so we'll get to be a part of the design and MVP for this. And so that'll be a lot of fun. And why companies would choose to be a part of the marketplace, in addition to having their own binaries on their own website, is so that anyone in the public will know that their binaries have been tested against a high level number of tests, as well as high quality tests. Perfect. So how we exactly do this is split up in two ways. So right now we have the AQA certification process. So some challenges we have right now is that the set of tests that they're running against is currently being pulled from master, but because master is always being changed, we'll need to change it so that vendors can choose a version of our test to run against. Some other challenges we have is answering questions like, how do we make it easier for vendors to run our tests? And once they run their tests, how do we make it easy for them to show us their results? The second thing we have to build is TRSS enhancement, which is like the website we had that Paul was talking about. So the first part is really talking about what's happening between the Adoptium team and the vendors. But now we need to be able to display all these results to the public. So some challenges there is like, how exactly do we display the test results for certain binaries to the public? And the second big thing is that we actually have 5 different set of tests with different outputs. So we need to be able to figure out how to parse them all separately and able to display it all. Perfect. So we're actually available on Twitter, GitHub, and Slack if you're interested in learning more. But thank you so much for listening, and we're super excited to contribute to this project.